There is a place on this earth where if you get sick tomorrow, help might not arrive for 3 months. No airport, no harbor, no way out. And yet, over 200 people wake up there every single morning, by choice. This is Tristan da Cunha, and once you understand why they stay, you will never think about home the same way again. Number 10. Trapped by the ocean. There is an island on this planet where missing the supply ship is not an inconvenience. It is a crisis. No airport, no commercial harbor, no helicopter pad. Just open ocean in every direction for thousands of kilometers. This is Tristan da Cunha, a British overseas territory sitting alone in the middle of the South Atlantic, built entirely from volcanic rock and covering just 98 square kilometers. Every single resident lives in one place, a settlement called Edinburgh of the Seven Seas. And the only way in or out is by sea, on a supply ship that makes the journey from Cape Town, South Africa. That trip alone takes 7 days. In good weather, ships visit between 6 and 8 times a year, carrying roughly a dozen passengers each time. But even arriving at the island does not guarantee you can step ashore. The coastline is a wall of black basalt cliffs, battered by waves that have built momentum across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. There is no proper pier. Whether you get off the ship depends entirely on what the sea decides to allow that day. In March of last year, a mechanical failure in South Africa canceled the supply route completely. The island waited 90 days for a replacement vessel. For 3 months, there was no fresh fruit, no new medicine, and no spare parts for anything that had broken down. When a serious emergency strikes, the alarm system is strikingly simple: a hammer and an empty gas cylinder, mounted on a pole in the center of the village. One strike sends a metallic sound echoing across every home in the settlement. No siren, no broadcast system, just metal on metal and a community that already knows what to do. In April of this year, the situation became serious enough that the British military parachuted 6 soldiers and 2 doctors directly onto the island to provide emergency medical treatment. This is everyday life on the most remote inhabited island in the world. Number 9. Love socks. When knitting sends the message. On an island where everyone knows everyone, romance cannot afford to be careless. With a population of only around 250 people, and families whose histories have been intertwined for generations, even a glance held a moment too long can become the talk of the entire village by evening. So over the past century and a half, the people of Tristan da Cunha developed a language of love that required no words at all. It is called love socks. When a young man expresses interest in a woman, she may respond not with words, but with a pair of hand-knitted wool socks. The socks are not just a gift. Every stripe woven into them carries a precise meaning that both parties understand completely. 2 large stripes signal moderate interest. She has noticed him, but nothing is decided. 2 large stripes with 3 small ones mean she wants to know him better. 2 large stripes with 5 small stripes communicate something deeper, sincere affection. And 2 large stripes with 6 small stripes carry the clearest message of all: she wants to marry him. If the man wishes to accept those feelings, his response is equally handmade. He crafts a pair of leather moccasins and presents them to her. The engagement becomes official only when she begins washing his clothes, a quiet, domestic act that signals to the entire community that 2 people have chosen each other. Everything is communicated through objects, through craft, through patient and deliberate action. Very little needs to be spoken out loud. Today, love socks still exist on Tristan da Cunha, though some have found their way into the island's post office and local shops as souvenirs, selling for around 15 to 25 British pounds. Visitors carry them home as keepsakes from a place most people will never see. But on the island itself, if a woman sits down and knits a pair of socks by hand for a specific person, it is understood that those stripes mean exactly what they have always meant. Some traditions survive not because they are preserved, but because they still say something no other language can. Number 8. When love and population become the same problem. On Tristan da Cunha, finding a partner is never purely a personal matter. With only around 250 residents on the entire island, the math of romance becomes complicated very quickly. Of that small population, only 30 to 40 people are single adults of working age, and almost all of them share family surnames that stretch back generations. On an island with 7 family names total, the question of who you can build a life with is not just an emotional one. It is a question the entire community quietly carries together. Some young people develop feelings for visiting researchers or seasonal workers who arrive for short periods. But most of those visitors eventually leave, and not everyone who leaves takes someone with them. The island's only police officer once noted that young people need the opportunity to experience the outside world. And many do leave, traveling to Cape Town or the United Kingdom to study and work. The difficulty is that a significant number of them do not return. Each departure is both understandable and quietly costly for a community this size. Over time, this isolation has made Tristan da Cunha one of the most studied communities in the history of genetics. Scientists have identified a genetic variant linked to asthma risk that appears at an unusually high frequency among islanders. Researchers believe at least 2 members of the original founding group carried it, and it has passed through every generation since. Several other inherited conditions have also been documented, including retinitis pigmentosa, a degenerative eye disease, and various forms of glaucoma. But the community does not approach these realities with only anxiety. When a baby is born on Tristan da Cunha, the whole village gives that child 2 lambs. It is a tradition that has continued for centuries. The lambs grow alongside the child, eventually providing meat, wool, and practical value. On an island served by a single resident doctor, that gesture carries a meaning beyond celebration. It is the community saying, in the clearest way it knows how, that this child belongs to all of them. Number 7. Rock lobster, the economy that feeds the world's most remote island. On an island with no factories, no tourism industry, and no financial district, survival depends on what the ocean provides. And what the ocean around Tristan da Cunha provides is something that high-end restaurants in New York and Tokyo are willing to pay extraordinary amounts of money for. Rock lobster. The Edinburgh Seafood Company is the island's most significant employer and its primary connection to the global economy. It catches local rock lobster from the cold, deep, unpolluted waters surrounding the island and ships it to luxury dining establishments across the world. A single half kilogram can sell for $60 to $80 at the destination. One lobster tail on a Manhattan menu can exceed $100 before preparation costs are added. What makes Tristan lobster worth that price is not just its scarcity. The waters here sit far from any industrialized coastline, free from the runoff and pollution that affect most commercial fishing zones. That natural purity is built into every catch, and it cannot be manufactured or replicated anywhere else on Earth. The seafood company employs around 30 islanders, approximately 12% of the entire population. The remaining workforce is spread across the government office, the school, the hospital, the post office, the local bar, and the island's only supermarket. That short list accounts for nearly the entire formal economy of Tristan da Cunha. Because the community is so small, the modern concept of strict job specialization barely applies here. One person might serve as an electrician during the week, sit on the island council in the evening, and head out to sea on the weekend to pull lobster traps. Roles overlap naturally because they have to. Even the official administrator sent from Britain cannot remain separate from the rhythms of daily community life. On Tristan da Cunha, the island functions because almost everyone contributes to it as a true resident, not as an outsider managing from a distance. Number 6. Potatoes, wooden boats, and a day the sea took everything on. Tristan da Cunha, potatoes are not simply a food, they are a measure of belonging. Every family on the island maintains its own plot in a communal farming area located about 3 kilometers from the main village. The potato beds sit inside small fields bordered by low stone walls, built specifically to shield the crops from the powerful South Atlantic winds that could flatten an unprotected plant overnight. On planting and harvest days, the distinction between work and community disappears entirely. Almost the entire island turns out together, not because anyone is required to, but because showing up is understood as part of what it means to live here. Anyone who consistently stays away from these shared working days is quietly noticed. On an island this small, withdrawal from communal life is not invisible. The sea is equally central to daily existence and equally unforgiving. Because the coastline offers no proper docking facilities, fishermen rely on long, flat-bottomed wooden boats specifically designed to push through the heavy surf near shore. Launching one requires timing and collective strengths. Experienced rowers watch the wave patterns carefully, waiting for the precise moment to commit. When they return, they must cross that same violent water again, reading the ocean with the same focused attention every single time. But the ocean around Tristan has delivered its cruelest lesson only once, and once was enough. In the 19th century, nearly every adult man on the island set out together in boats to reach a passing merchant ship. The sea turned without warning. The waves changed direction faster than the boats could respond. Not one of them made it back to shore. What remained in the village that evening were almost entirely women, widows, left behind in a settlement at the edge of the world, with no way to call for help and no reason to expect any would come. That single day reshaped the island's population, its memory, and its understanding of what the ocean can cost. Number 5. The island, built by those who stayed. Tristan da Cunha was not built by explorers who planted a flag and called it home. It was built, slowly and imperfectly, by the people who simply refused to leave. The island was first sighted in 1506 by Portuguese navigator Tristan da Cunha, who gave it his name but never set foot on it. The weather was too violent, the sea too unpredictable. He recorded its existence and sailed on. For the next 3 centuries, the island remained exactly that, a name on a map, and nothing more. In 1810, an American named Jonathan Lambert arrived with 2 companions, declared himself ruler of the island, and announced he intended to stay permanently. 2 years later he was gone, most likely drowned at sea. His companions left shortly after. The island returned to silence. Then, in 1816, Britain established a small military garrison on Tristan, motivated not by the island itself, but by Napoleon Bonaparte, who was being held on the nearby island of St. Helena. London feared Tristan could be used as a base for a rescue operation. When that threat faded, the garrison was recalled. But one man asked to stay. A Scottish corporal named William Glass remained behind with 2 companions. Together, the 3 of them drew up a small agreement. Shared property, equal labor, no hierarchy among them. For an island with a population of 3, it functioned as something close to a constitution. William Glass married Maria Magdalena Leander, a woman from St. Helena of both African and European descent. They went on to have 16 children, laying the foundation for nearly every family line that followed. In 1892, an Italian sailing ship named the Italia wrecked near the island's shore. 16 survivors were cared for by islanders for 3 months. When rescue arrived, 2 of those sailors, Andrea Repetto and Gaetano Lavarello, refused to board. They had fallen in love with local women and chosen to stay. Today, roughly 45 residents carry the surnames Repetto or Lavarello. 2 of the island's 7 family names began with a single shipwreck and 2 men who decided that Tristan da Cunha was worth staying for. Number 4. Leaving only to return. On the morning of October 10, 1961, the ground near Edinburgh of the 7 Seas cracked open. It began quietly, a thin line splitting the earth close to the canning factory. Then steam pushed through, then smoke. Then, within hours, lava began moving toward the only settlement on the island. There was no second village to retreat to, no higher ground with shelter already built. There was only the ocean, and whatever ship happened to be nearby. The island council convened an emergency meeting and reached the only conclusion available to them. Every single resident had to leave immediately. 264 people were evacuated aboard a Dutch fishing vessel that was passing through the area. They carried only what their hands could hold. There was no time to pack properly, no time to make decisions about what mattered most. Within hours, lives that had been rooted in this island for generations were reduced to whatever fit in one person's arms. For many of the older islanders, the evacuation was their first encounter with the modern world. Some had never ridden in a motorized vehicle, never seen a traffic light, never walked on a paved road. They were taken first to Cape Town, then by ship to England, and finally to a former Royal Air Force base in Hampshire, where the British government provided housing, employment, education, and the legal right to remain permanently. By any practical measure, they had been given a better life. 2 years after the evacuation, scientists confirmed that the volcanic activity had ceased and that most of the village remained structurally intact. The British government presented the islanders with a formal choice. They could stay in England, keep everything they had been given, and begin again in the modern world. Or they could go back. In 1963, 198 people voted to return to Tristan da Cunha. They chose an island with no airport, no reliable supply route, and no guarantee that the volcano would not crack open again. One islander who had been a child during the evacuation later said that Tristan was so quiet you could sometimes hear the grass grow. For the people who returned, that quiet was not something to escape. It was something to come home to. Number 3. A seabird paradise. And the day the whole island goes rat hunting. Tristan da Cunha is not just the most remote inhabited island on Earth. For one species in particular, it is the most important piece of land on the planet. The northern rockhopper penguin, a compact, sharp-eyed bird with distinctive yellow-feathered crests above each eye, nests along the coastal cliffs of Tristan and its surrounding islands in numbers that are difficult to fully absorb. Approximately 80% of the entire global population of this species lives here. Not 80% of the regional population. 80% of every northern rockhopper penguin that exists on Earth is concentrated around this single remote archipelago. The great albatross also returns to these islands to breed. Over a single lifetime, one albatross may fly more than 8 million kilometers, the equivalent of roughly 200 return trips between the Earth and the Moon. And yet, after covering that extraordinary distance across open ocean, it still comes back to Tristan to raise its young. What makes the wildlife here unusual is how it behaves around people. Many species show almost no fear of humans. The reason is straightforward. The island originally had no native land predators. No foxes, no cats, nothing with 4 legs that hunted. Over countless generations, the birds here evolved with no instinct to flee from anything that walked on the ground. That absence of fear is remarkable to witness, and it makes them profoundly vulnerable. In 1974, the island officially banned cats after feral populations began killing young seabirds faster than the ecosystem could recover. But removing the cats created a new problem. Rats, no longer controlled, began multiplying and threatening both crops and ground-nesting birds. The islanders responded in a way that is entirely consistent with how Tristan da Cunha handles most challenges. They turned it into a community event. Once a year, men and boys form competing teams, bringing dogs and traps into the fields for a day of organized rat hunting. Tails are collected and counted by the island's doctor and veterinarian, who serve as official scorekeepers. The team with the highest count wins a prize. When the hunting ends, everyone eats, drinks, and dances together. On Tristan da Cunha, even pest control has a way of becoming something worth celebrating. Number 2. No locks, no strangers, no distance between neighbors. In a place where everyone knows your name, your parents' names, and very likely your grandparents' names as well, the idea of locking your door against your neighbors becomes almost meaningless. Tristan da Cunha has a functioning police station. It has an officer on duty. But the nature of the work here looks almost nothing like policing anywhere else in the world. There is very little crime to investigate. The officer's time is largely spent on paperwork, community coordination, and administrative tasks that keep the settlement running smoothly. The story most often repeated about Tristan is that residents do not lock their doors. The reality is slightly more layered than that. Most homes simply were never fitted with locks, designed to prevent theft, because theft from a neighbor has never been a significant concern. Some doors do have heavy sliding bolts, but their purpose has nothing to do with security in the conventional sense. The winds coming off the South Atlantic can reach speeds exceeding 120 kilometers per hour. Those bolts exist to keep the storm outside, not the community. The island's only supermarket does lock its doors, but only because it has set opening and closing hours, not because anyone fears what might happen if it did not. That same culture of trust extends to the dinner table. Tristan rock lobster, the engine of the island's export economy, is also a regular feature of home cooking. The meat is firm, sweet, and pale in color, and it appears in everything from simply grilled preparations to savory pies made in family kitchens. Lamb and beef are also common, particularly at large Sunday gatherings, where food is shared openly between households. Some older traditional recipes once included albatross meat. Conservation efforts have made that practice rare today, but it speaks to a community that has always eaten what its particular corner of the earth provided, and wasted very little of it. As evening settles over Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, residents drift toward the island's only bar. Stories are exchanged, meals are shared. The same people who worked alongside each other that morning sit together again before the day ends. On Tristan da Cunha, community is not something that happens occasionally. It is the entire structure of daily life. Number 1. Where the ocean, the volcano, and the Milky Way meet. To understand just how alone Tristan da Cunha is, it helps to look at a map and trace the distance to the nearest inhabited place in every direction. To the north, St. Helena, the island where Napoleon Bonaparte spent his final years and died in 1821, sits approximately 2,400 kilometers away. The African continent lies more than 4,300 kilometers to the northeast. South America is nearly 6,000 kilometers to the west. Antarctica is around 2,700 kilometers to the south. In every direction, without exception, there is only ocean. But Tristan da Cunha is not simply an island that sits in the ocean. It is the ocean, in a sense. The island is itself a volcano, a massive geological structure that rises from the floor of the South Atlantic. Queen Mary's Peak, its summit, stands just over 2,000 meters above sea level. But the true base of that mountain sits more than 11,000 meters beneath the surface of the water. Measured from the ocean floor to its peak, the entire structure rises more than 13,000 meters, significantly taller than Mount Everest, measured the same way. Almost none of it is visible. What can be seen from shore is a near-continuous wall of black basalt cliffs, hammered constantly by waves that have gathered energy across thousands of kilometers of open water. There is only one location where those cliffs give way to flat land, a hardened lava platform roughly 2 kilometers wide and 5 kilometers long. That narrow shelf of ground is the only reason Edinburgh of the Seven Seas exists where it does. The climate stays relatively stable throughout the year, generally between 10 and 20 degrees Celsius, but the island's exposed position in the Southern Ocean means violent storms arrive regularly, bringing winds that can exceed 120 kilometers per hour. And then night falls. Tristan da Cunha sits at level 1 on the Bortle scale, which measures light pollution. New York City sits at level 9. From this island, the naked eye can identify approximately 7,500 individual stars. The Milky Way appears with such clarity and density that on the darkest nights, it casts a faint but measurable shadow on the ground beneath it. Standing on that narrow lava shelf, with the southern Atlantic pushing against the cliffs below and the galaxy stretched overhead, it is possible to feel something that is genuinely difficult to name. Not loneliness exactly, something closer to scale, an awareness of how large the world is and how deliberately these people have chosen this particular corner of it. Tristan da Cunha is not easy to reach, and it is not easy to leave. But perhaps that is precisely the point. The distance has shaped a community that operates on trust, that marks its calendar with communal potato harvests and rat hunting competitions, that sends messages of love through hand-knitted wool, and that once chose to return to a volcanic island over a comfortable life on the British mainland. The question the island keeps asking, quietly and without urgency, is not why anyone would choose to live somewhere this remote. It is what the rest of us might be missing by never having to make that choice at all. If this story made you see the world a little differently, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss what we uncover next. Drop a comment below and tell us, if you had to live on the most remote island on Earth, could you do it? And if not, where in the world would you actually choose to disappear to? We read every single one.